Hello, Guru Nation. Welcome back to another episode. Very special episode. I've got my PI and my doctor, my physician. We have Dr. Marco Zahedi here. Dr. Marco Zahedi is a family practice physician. Why don't you give him a little background of who you are?
Sure. I'm Dr. Z. Everyone calls me Dr. Z. It's hard to pronounce my last name sometimes. We here have kind of a primary care practice / dermatology focus. Came into this basically from residency. I was originally sort of fascinated with reconstructive surgeries and the hard stuff associated with surgery, and sort of backtracking even before that, I was interested in cancer treatments, focusing on research in college and undergrad. So I think the path has been long. It's been about 15 years of training. I also got my master's in public health, which seems relevant now with the pandemic going on.
Mm-hmm.
So I think with regard to sort of paths and whatnot, you don't always necessarily know where you're going to end up, but it's really important, sort of along in my path at least, to sort of do your best and be as aggressive as you can for your education and shoot for the moon, because you never know where you're going to end, or where you're going to sort of settle. Yep.
We might have other physicians watching. So what was it that about research that you said, hey, this might be a good fit for my private practice?
Well, research in this sense, for our working together, Dan and myself, we have patients who sort of run through all the medications that are FDA approved, and they all have a known side effect profile, and not all of them work for every patient. And so I think the next logical step with respect to research is to engage patients who want to try alternative options out there. In my practice, I originally started doing IV vitamin infusions for people. We extended eventually at some point to try and cell therapies and things that are outside sort of the box thinking, provided the patients were okay with that, obviously. And it sort of put me in the mindset to think outside the box, and I think you need to kind of have that perspective in order to engage in research.
And what's the difference between, because now we did one of our first site selection visits, we did a virtual one, as a PI for our site. What's the difference, because you're also on the sponsor side, so what is the difference? You're like on the other side of the table now.
Right, so I mean, sponsor is more industry driven in a sense where they have products that have been put through tons of research, and they're really, really, really motivated to get those research products to the market. And so, there's a lot that goes into that with respect to managing other doctors, as opposed to what Dan and I are doing, where I'm a PI, is I am the doctor. I am seeing my own patients. That's more kind of a day-to-day task of a physician who does the sponsor side. You're really, or anyone on the sponsor side, you're really sort of micromanaging clinical sites. You're working with CROs to get your clinical sites up and running. You're working with the FDA on conversations to get your studies approved for phase 1 or phase 2. You're doing bench work research with obviously your PhD students and PhD candidates, and your in-house physician or non-physician scientists who are doing sort of your animal studies, or you're working with large research organizations that do animal studies, and you're telling them sort of what sort of setup you want. So it's really expansive on both sides. And on that side, sort of on the clinical corporate side, sponsor side, you really need to have a repertoire of skills, from working with FDA to CROs to companies that do animal model research, to managing your staff and working with your staff in-house, coming up with brainstorming ideas of which indications your product will go. I mean, those ideas don't come out of nowhere. They're internal ideas. And so this Thursday, for example, I have to go to the company that I'm CMO for, and we have to come up with some ideas to use our cell therapy, our cultured mesenchymal stem cell product. Do we want to do ulcerative colitis? Do we want to do rheumatoid arthritis? That question really resonates, because which of these can we recruit patients? Not necessarily my practice, but other doctors' practices. Which one is going to have the best bang for the buck, really, the high yield? Are there commonalities between them which would be beneficial? Because if we can go sort of with a low-hanging fruit and get that approved for a phase 1 and demonstrate it, as I'm sure everyone watching phase 1 is that safety question. Is this a safe drug? If we can prove it's safe, then with this simple sort of indication, we can jump outside of that indication and expand to more complicated medical conditions and have a higher chance of the FDA saying, oh, we've seen your drug, we know it's safe in this setting, it's a similar setting, albeit a different diagnosis or condition, you're much more likely to get approval to proceed with your phase 1. On the physician side, when you're doing your PI work, it's really focused. You're narrow, you're working on your patients with one particular drug, one particular indication sometimes, unless you have multiple studies of different drugs going on. You're really enrolling patients, you're talking and consenting with the patients, you're treating the patients. For example, in about 5 minutes I have to go upstairs, and I'm a sub-I for upstairs where we're doing COVID studies. We're doing Eli Lilly study for monoclonal antibody infusions, and we have 2 positive patients, and we have to go upstairs and infuse them with medications. I have to go up there, consent them with all my PPE on, consent them, talk to them, make sure they understand the risk and benefits of the medication. It's all about informed consent on the PI side, especially in research. They make a big deal about that. Really being patient with the patient in terms of their understanding. Sometimes they don't have the highest socioeconomic status or education. You really need to spend a lot of time with them to make sure that this is the right choice for them. And then, at the back end, making sure they're safe, doing a physical exam, monitoring them, tracking them, and following them. And then finally doing data collection, getting a data log where you're providing the sponsor with all the data that they want, and making sure there's an integrity and ethical sort of surrounding your research, and making sure you're blinded, and all that stuff goes into that side, so that there's no sort of question about whether there's a change or manipulation of the data, that what they're getting is correct. And this is going on at maybe 10, 15, 20 sites around the country simultaneous with you, and then we jump back to the sponsor. They're getting all that data and collecting and seeing, and then reporting it to the FDA. So there's a lot of back and forth on both sides, from the sponsor to the PI. And I think when you have experience on one side, it's not that hard to get experience on the other side, and vice versa. So again, I go back to what I said: get as much experience as you can, and that's probably the best thing.
You think doing research makes you a better physician, and vice versa? Yeah. Having the private practice makes you a better researcher?
Absolutely. It's not just sort of about the research. It's more, for me, in my sense, about offering patients alternative options in the regulatory pathways that are available to us. And not everyone qualifies for studies, so to be able to offer my
most
patients,
don't.
Most don't, and so it's really a limited number of patients, and sometimes they have to scatter, go travel far to get access to studies. Like, for example, they're doing eczema studies upstairs, and here and there I'll go upstairs and see one of their patients, and it's nice to see. I treat eczema a lot down here. It's nice to see, for example, upstairs that they have a really good drug that works really well, and for me, I can start sending my patients up there and knowing that their drug is working and helping, and otherwise I'm prescribing steroids and Humira and biologics, and it's not necessarily the best option. Science is constantly pushing forward, and if you don't do research, or you don't have a diligent thirst for knowledge and read your papers and keep up with your journals, you're going to fall behind in your practice, and you don't want to do that. So I think it's all about keeping your head in the game.
Thank you, Dr. Z, and looking forward to CRMD and San Bernardino.
Good luck. Thank you.
Bye-bye.